Hey dancers, welcome back to Broche Banter. I'm Julie, your host, and we're going to do another Just Me and You episode today. Thank you so much for enjoying the last episode with my ballet advice for you. You had a lot of great questions, and we're going to get into a bit of Broche history and my story. There's probably a lot of new faces around here who maybe haven't been following along the whole time. So I'll start at the beginning, tell you a bunch of things, and then answer some of your questions at the end. I feel like I should just start at the beginning because some of the questions may not make sense if you don't have the whole context of the story. So we'll just go into all the whole thing and I'll kind of take you from the beginning of how all of this started and how it happened and why we're sitting here together. Next week, we'll have an episode where Grace, from actually a few episodes ago, comes on the podcast and interviews me about what she wanted to know. Actually, she had a lot of questions, and we get pretty deep into the emotional side of things, like what it felt like being a business owner, what those early days felt like in entrepreneurship. So stay tuned for that one. But this episode here will hopefully give you some context going into that episode about how we got here and what we're doing. So let's dive in. How all of this started. You may know that I started ballet at 17. I did not start as a child. I had no ballet training in childhood. This is not late to be in ballet in terms of like life as a whole. Like 17 is still extremely young. However, when it comes to the skill level of other dancers at the age of 17, they're already quite proficient, ready to get their professional contracts. Maybe some of them are already apprentices in ballet. So when you're in class with other 17-year-olds and you've never danced, you are way late to the party, let's say. So I began at 17 and really was not at all, it was just complete beginner. Like I had no experience in dance other than unsuccessfully trying out for a dance team when I was like 12 years old. But I had zero dance experience at that point. I didn't even have a leotard, so I did it in my PE clothes and obviously didn't make the team. So I really had no dance experience. I had a lot of musical training. I had been doing music since a very young age. I begged my brother's teacher to start teaching me even before I was 5. I think I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I begged my brother's teacher to start teaching me. She wouldn't agree to teach me. She says she doesn't teach people under 5. So I just went ahead and learned my brother's music and played it at his recital. She asked the crowd for any volunteers who wanted to play. And apparently I raised my hand and proceeded to walk up and play his music. Where I got the gumption for that, I have no idea. But anyways, that's how much I wanted to learn music when I was a young child. So she agreed to teach me, and I started piano lessons. At that age, I studied piano until I was in maybe third or so grade when I was able to join a band in school. Then I started the flute. I studied that until I was a sophomore in high school, and then I switched to the euphonium, which is like a baby tuba, and studied that for the last 3 years of high school. Was I loved music. Music touches me very deeply. Have had some of the most emotional moments with music and from music. I spent all of my summers at music camp as a kid. I would go there, and for a few weeks we would live together and learn concert pieces together, and it was an incredible experience. So my childhood was very much rooted in music, and music is rather sedentary other than marching band, but really it was not a physical. I did not have a physical childhood or a childhood of physicality. It was very much rooted in musical training and musical study. That was, of course, extremely valuable. You learn all kinds of really important lessons in music, like how to practice by yourself, how to break things down into smaller pieces, how to use a metronome, how to work on getting something from slow to fast. Like, there's a lot of skills that translate, but not coordination or physicality. So when I was 17, I was in my last year of high school, and I was just like kind of over it. I was tired of music. I was tired of school. I was tired of living in California. I was like tired of everything and wanted something new to try. I wanted something new that was like where I was at the bottom. I wanted something very hard that I could start from the beginning. And as a very clumsy person, people made fun of me for tripping up the stairs, for tripping over cracks in the sidewalk. I couldn't touch my toes. I was very clumsy. And I thought, ballet is probably the hardest thing that I can think of. I had seen maybe a couple of performances of ballet as a kid. I remember loving the point shoes and the costumes, but I wasn't particularly obsessed with ballet. I was aware of ballet and how hard it probably was, but I wasn't necessarily like obsessed with ballet. I actually was much more obsessed with ice skating and with ice dance. I loved the sparkly costumes and how beautiful the women looked, and just I was mesmerized by how gorgeous ice skaters were. So it was so weird because I wasn't even like obsessed with ballet, but whatever, when I was 17, I knew I wanted something new. I knew I wanted to be bad at something. I wanted something hard. I wanted something really tough. And so I started ballet. I had a job at that point working in medical billing as an assistant, and I had you know, I had a car at that point, so I could just drive myself to ballet class after work and my mom had to sign a permission slip for me to go to this open class in San Diego at I think it was called the California Ballet Academy with Oscar Burciaga. It was great. Um, and so I would go there, and I went there the first day. I walked in there, and I had no idea what to expect. I had Googled like what is first position. I had Googled the basics, right? There wasn't really YouTube back then. I think this was only 2 years after YouTube had started, so there wasn't people like teaching ballet on the online. So I had Googled like what to do in beginner ballet class. And of course you get like the diagrams of first position, second position, third position, fourth position, but without any context, like that's really not useful information. And anyways, when you get there, that's like such a small part of ballet class. So really I walked in there having no idea what to expect. I mean, I got in there and I remember thinking like this is literally nothing like what you see on stage. Like what are we doing here? This doesn't make any sense. This is literally nothing at all like what was happening on the stage. I remember just being super confused about what it was, but 100% loved it. Like it was the most focused I'd ever been. It was the most calm my mind ever was. I was so immersed in the moment and I just remember leaving there thinking like this is it. Like I found my one true love. Like it was love at first sight and I didn't know what we were doing. I didn't know what I was wearing. I didn't know anything about ballet training at all, but I knew that it was like for me, like the home for me. But of course, at that age, you would watch the girls who are your age, teenagers. Like I was in the adult class, but you would watch the girls who are teenagers, and you'd watch them and how beautiful they already were by 17. They're already in their point shoes. They're already doing all this amazing stuff. And at 17, again, not old in terms of life, but in terms of watching the girls who are at the same age as you and where they are, I definitely knew from the beginning that this was a boat I had missed, right? This was already like, I love this. How can this be a bigger part of my life? Obviously, it can't because that's where I would have needed to be at 17, right? I clearly needed to have started this in preschool. My parents had put me in one class. I was way too shy and never went back again after the first day. I wore the tutu around the house all the time, but I was way too shy for actual class. So apparently, that was my opportunity to have made ballet a part of my life, right? So I loved it a lot, but I kind of had this knowledge and awareness that it was not going to be able to be part of my life. Okay, so in parallel with all of this, like I'm still living my life, right? I'm still going to school, I'm still planning for college, I'm still doing all of this stuff. As far as college goes, I never knew what I would have wanted to study when I was a kid. I never knew I liked a lot of different things. I had a ton of different interests. I was always trying different things, learning new things. I liked video games and then I liked music. And like I said, I had the piano and then the flute and then the euphonium and I was drum major for a while. And I was like a kind of a dabbler of all things and was interested in a lot of things. So when it came to like picking one thing to do for a major or for a job, I always really struggled with that idea because I could see myself enjoying a lot of different things. I loved physics, I loved math, I loved a lot other than English. I really didn't like English class. That's like the one thing I didn't really like. But I really liked a lot of different topics and things. So I was pretty lost on what I wanted to do with my life and what I would do for a major. But I did know that I wanted to live in New York City. That's one thing I did know for sure. My parents probably thought I was a loon, but I was dead set on that I was going to live in New York one day. When I was in high school, in middle school, which would have been eighth grade, which probably was around age 13 or 14, we went on like a school class trip to Washington, D.C. to learn about history. We visited the battlefields, we visited the Capitol, we visited, all these historic places. And we had one evening stopover in Manhattan. So we take the tour bus from DC to New York like age 13, 14. And I get off the bus in like the middle of Times Square. They drop us off in the middle of Times Square. And I looked up and I saw the lights and the sounds and the theaters and everything. And I was just like, wow, I gotta live here. This is like the best place I've ever seen. This is like the coolest. Like, this is it. This is home. The energy here, everything just like it just immediately felt drawn to that place, specifically, Times Square. Like, it was just, I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never seen so much energy in one place. I'd never seen so many lights and so many cars and so many people and so much energy going around. So I came back from the trip and I was like, I want to live in New York. And my parents look at me like, okay, well, we've been paying into the California school system this whole time. So probably you'll go to college in California. Probably not New York, good luck finding, good luck making your way there, which is a totally reasonable response for a kid in San Diego who really just kind of came back on a whim from a trip, right? Totally, reasonable response. I didn't take any offense to it or anything. So was looking for colleges in California, and nearing the middle of high school, I received a letter one day in the mail from the Seidenberg School of Computer Science in downtown Manhattan. And this letter was inviting me to go to a summer robotics program in New York City in the downtown Manhattan campus. And we have no idea how they found me at that point because I hadn't taken the SATs, I hadn't taken the standardized test, but whatever. I needed to go to New York and somehow I received this letter. And so the letter invited me to go. My dad took me out for the summer program and I did the summer program, the summer robotics program. And basically at the summer program, the stipulation there was like if we like you, you can get in and you'll get a scholarship to come here and study computer science. And so they offered me a scholarship after the summer robotics program. They offered me a scholarship to come live there in New York City and to be in the computer science program and to study computer science. And so I was over the moon. It was like basically a no-brainer. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know which major I wanted. I mean, I'm fine with computers. I liked math. I liked logical things and logic puzzles and various things. So I was fine with the idea of computer science. I think I had taken some programming classes with my brother in the summertime, like some C++, and like my dad taught us how to do basic programming, like the language basic. So I don't know, I had some experience with it. And so I accepted that, and that's how I ended up studying computer science, and that's how I ended up in New York City. Was I accepted that random unsuspecting letter that I got in the mail one day. Of all the mail to have opened, that would have been the letter to have opened. So I moved to New York City after I graduated college, or after I graduated high school, to start college in downtown Manhattan, and that was super tough. I mean, super tough. Obviously, leaving home is tough no matter when you do it, but certainly being so young and being so naive and growing up in like suburb rural San Diego to moving to downtown Manhattan as a young, I mean, teenager, right? I was 18. Um, I was 18 and I moved there. God bless my parents' souls. They, supported me through all of that. I'm sure it was really terrifying for them to just drop me off there and in downtown Manhattan. I can't, um, at the time, felt that they should have done that, but looking back now, I can't believe that you know, they went with it, they went for it, they supported me and all of it. I mean, amazing that they let me let me move there. But anyways, I went there and studied computer science and just immersed myself into the New York City dance scene. I took classes wherever I could, whenever I could, all over town, every ballet studio I could find. It was like a buffet. I mean, every time I had a break from class, it was like to the ballet studio. Let's go take class. I had never experienced anything like it. I mean, didn't know what was happening in a lot of the classes. Like I was still new to ballet and figuring everything out, but I went to as much as I could, as frequently as I could. I worked various jobs, always making sure I had some, spending money to go to all these classes. And yeah, I just took as many classes as I can. Eventually got into the dance minor program at Pace University. Now it's an incredible a whole like commercial dance program. It's blossomed into an incredible thing. I think I was in the inaugural year of their dance minor. They only had a dance minor and there was only a handful of us in it. And then over the course of those years and now since then, it's incredible program. So I feel very honored to have been a part of those first years of the dance minor program when it was still like when it was just an idea and it's becoming what it was now. So I got to train with some incredible teachers. They had brought in absolutely incredible performers and teachers from over New York City to teach us in this dance minor program. I mean, it was an incredible learning experience. That's where we got to train in ballet, we got to train in jazz and in lyrical and in contemporary and in hip hop. And well, hip hop I was not very good at. That would take a little bit more practice. And then tap, which was so hard but so good for the rhythm. We got to train in all these different styles. We learned how to do choreography and yeah, it was amazing. So all of this time just diving into New York. I also started private lessons when I was in New York City. I emailed a beautiful woman named Beth Kurtz and asked her to train me as much as possible. We spent quite a long time together. We would do a couple times a week, 90-minute private lessons. We would study lots and lots and lots together as much as possible. I would take her advice and rent studio space because in New York you can rent studio space any time of the day. Like you can rent studio space and just practice. So I would rent studio space and go in there and practice and record myself and send her videos. And like I would just practice myself all the time. I mean, from music, you know that you practice all the time. So I practice, take her, study with her privately, take the group classes, taking the dance minor as much as possible. I mean, obviously, I'm still in the computer science program. Like I'm living my parallel computer science life, but as you know, my heart is in ballet. So I was still doing the computer science program, and I did fine in that program. I graduated at the top of my class. I actually got to sit on the stage of Radio City Music Hall in the graduation, and I would say one of my top regrets in life is that I chickened out wearing my point shoes to the graduation. I had wanted to wear my point shoes to graduate, but I chickened out at the last second. I got too afraid that I would trip on the stairs or fall over in my point shoes, so I chickened out. But how cool! I could have said that I wore point shoes on the stage of Radio City Music Hall. What a missed opportunity. Um, but anyways, so this was like the bulk of my training. Getting close to the end of my senior year, I guess the end of my junior year of college, yeah, I realized that I was just about the oldest possible year to apply to get into some of the youth uh, summer intensives. I don't know how I thought of this. Was it Beth who told me? Was it some of the students at Pace who told me about it? I don't know. I don't remember how I got the idea that I could still potentially go into one of these youth training programs. But anyways, I realized that some of them stop at 21 or 22. Now I think I've checked all the ones that I was applying for, and they've all kind of reduced their age, which is sad. But at that time, there was still some you could get into up until the age of 22. Until the age of 2. It's not that dire. Until the age of 22. So I went on an audition circuit around New York City. The great thing about living in New York City is every company who has anything that they're auditioning for is gonna come to New York City. So I got to audition for schools all across the country, some even in Europe, who all had summer program auditions in New York City. I mean, even that audition experience itself was a massive learning experience because I was in there with the girls who are 17 or like 18 about to get their professional contracts, and I was maybe 4-ish years of ballet training of ballet training, right? So I was in there with 4 years of experience on point for maybe 2 years with these girls who are 17, 18, about to get their professional contracts going into their summer intensives. Incredibly humbling experience. Did maybe 15 auditions to try to go to these summer programs. I got into two of them. I got into Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet summer program. That's a 5-week program in Pennsylvania, and I got into the Gelsey Kirkland Collegiate Intensive, which is a 2-week intensive in New York City at Gelsey Kirkland's studios. So I got into those two programs. I was totally thrilled to get into both of those programs. That was 7 weeks of like immersive ballet training. I could not wait. I had been saving up money all year from my job and from my work, and I spent all of it, every last cent on that summer. I came back and it was a rough couple of weeks before my job started again with school. I spent like all of it. I just like went for it. I went to Pennsylvania and stayed with this amazing family who let me sort of au pair for them and tutor one of their kids and sort of help around the house in exchange for staying there. So at least I didn't have to pay for another rent, right? Because I already had an apartment in New York City. So I stayed with them for 5 weeks. We're still near and dear. I invited them to my wedding. They still are a part of my life. They're an amazing family, and we really bonded during that time together. So I had that 5 weeks of training at CPYB and then the 2 weeks at Gelsey Kirkland. The funny thing about Gelsey Kirkland is they did not have enough for their collegiate intensive. So I actually ended up in their pre-professional intensive with these incredible, incredible dancers. So I was meant to be with college kids of my own age, right? But yeah, that didn't happen. So that's how I got into the Gelsey Kirkland pre-professional training program. And that was an incredible experience, like to get to train with Gelsey and to get to train with her counterparts. I mean, that was an incredible experience to be in that room for 2 weeks with those dancers. I mean, the amount you can learn in that period of time was just mind blowing and absolutely incredible. So I did the 7 weeks, 2 weeks first off at Gelsey's, and then 5 weeks at the CPYB summer program. And I mean, I love going back into my journal from that period of time because I would write everything down. I love going back into my journal, and I can see where so many of the things that I still talk about in my classes originated from those incredible training programs. They originated from those incredible places that were so focused on technique. Gelsey was so focused on artistry and how to create a character. And some of those early experiences, like they were huge. They were hugely beneficial, like an incredible opportunity. Okay, so all of that happened during college, and I graduated college, and I was throughout college working as a tutor at the Mathnasium, which is a after-school program for kids who are having trouble in math and who need help getting ahead. My whole life I've been a math tutor. I mean, since maybe elementary school, I was helping the other kids in my class. I've always, always, always helped people with math. And during that time at Mathnasium was incredibly influential to me because I got to see these kids come in with zero number sense. Like they were really struggling. They had no clue what was going on. They were really, really lost. And then after like a very short time with us and with the Mathnasium method and with us as tutors to encourage them and to help them grow, like they would make massive improvement and massive progress. Like working at Mathnasium was truly a fulfilling experience. I loved working there. I worked there as many hours as I could. I loved seeing those kids improve. And I mean, that was one of the most rewarding jobs that I've had, like as a job at work that I've had. It was incredibly rewarding to watch these kids get to improve and to get to be a part of their life. And especially with something like math, where it's like you feel like you either get it or you don't get it, and you're just like not a math person or you are a math person. But we took like quote unquote not math people and turned them into math people, and they would love it. Their eyes would light up when they understood concepts, and that feeling of getting them to understand things was incredibly helpful. So the whole Mathnasium method was just an incredibly systematic approach. It was an incredibly systematic approach where you could assess what was going on with the students, where their gaps were, and just help fill in those gaps. And once you see them, once the foundation is filled in, they just soar ahead and they catch back up with their grade and they're thrilled and they have confidence, and then they approach harder and harder problems, and they even ask for harder problems and they ask for challenges, and it was just like incredible. So after college, I had several offers for programming jobs. I had several offers for computer science jobs, and I had an offer at Mathnasium for to be the assistant director at the Mathnasium and to grow in that role. And so I ended up taking the job as an assistant director at the Mathnasium. Um, After a few months there, I really found that the job wasn't for me. The assistant directorship was a lot different than being a tutor. It had a lot more to do with calling the parents and trying to make the sales and managing the operations. And I felt very disconnected from the students. And that really wasn't the role for me. So I left that after just a few months. I actually left that and took another programming job at Street Easy, which is like Zillow, but for New York City specifically. And worked there as a developer, worked there as a programmer for about a year. Um, the cool part, I mean, I learned a ton at that job. I learned a ton there about, programming, about being in a company, being on a team, how to get things done, how to get big things done. Like I learned a ton about just like life at that job. Just like working at a grown-up job, working in a professional environment. I learned a lot about how things get done and how work gets done. But really at that time, once I started at Street Easy, I did kind of leave ballet. I left ballet because I wanted it so badly that it was just like sad to only have it a couple hours a week. It was just like sad to only be able to dance an hour here and there after work, or, a little bit on the weekend. And it was just like, if for me, it was, I almost like, I just had to go cold turkey and like leave it so that I could just settle in and enjoy my new adult life and like my career, and just try to like accept that dance wasn't going to be my life, and just accept that, this is a great job. I should be grateful for it. I have this amazing skill. I have this amazing team. And just like in order to sort of settle into that position, I had to cut ballet out of my life. So I actually left ballet shortly after college. I, did some classes here and there, but I just couldn't have it in my life in a small way. It wasn't possible. It was really too hard for me to have it in a life in a small way, right? You break up with someone and you just stay friends. It can work, but it wasn't possible for me with ballet. I then, kind of just immersed myself into work. I did a couple of speaking gigs about programming and various things to try to keep, my appetite for performing. And, just kind of tried to settle into my life. We had some cool events, like Zillow bought Street Easy at a certain point, and I got to ring the NASDAQ bell and got to be on the big billboard in Times Square and have the whole experience of being in a startup company that was bought by a big company, which was such an exciting time and super interesting. At a certain point, I got another job at a company called School Keep, which meant if you're in the online learning space, maybe you've heard of Teachable. We were an early competitor with them when online learning and setting up your own course platform was kind of a new thing. So I worked at School Keep as a developer to start, and then I moved into product management there and like strategic client relationships, and learned a ton at that job about how, again, about how things get done, how to manage a team, how to manage, sales, how to manage, high ticket customers, how to really develop professional relationships with people and with customers, with clients, and how to nurture those relationships and how to make really business partnerships with your clients and with your customers. So I learned a lot in that period of time, not just about programming, but about how to build big things as a product manager, how to take designs and turn them into websites, how to manage the operations of a customer relationship, and just a huge, huge, huge amount during that particular time. Through all of this, through both jobs, like I always, I was so angsty at that time. It was tough. I was in my early to mid 20s, and it was tough. I started taking up powerlifting on my own just to stay healthy and stay in shape. At that time, I worked with a really influential coach who kind of taught me to trust my body and trust myself and taught me how to get stronger and kind of taught me how to enjoy exercise because up until then I loved to dance but didn't really love like any other form of exercise, so like taught me how to enjoy feeling my body get stronger and taught me how to enjoy like working out, and that was a really influential uh, period in my life in which I learned how to motivate myself, how motivation worked, how improvement gives you motivation. I mean, we ended up working pretty far together in the powerlifting, and it was a really interesting experience to be a power lifter and to get to feel your body grow and change and see the progress in the gym. I really liked a couple things that progress was so much easier to measure in powerlifting. Like you add 5 more pounds and it's like, yay, like it felt great. Whereas ballet, it's like, oh yeah, you did that a little bit better or worse. I don't know. And it's really hard to judge progress in ballet. So I did really appreciate the simplicity of powerlifting. I really appreciated the simplicity of it. And it kind of helped me kind of build up something new within myself during that period of time when I was just kind of feeling a little bit lost in my career and what I wanted to do with my life. I go back and read journals from that time and I was just searching for how can I make a difference? How can I reach people more? What can I do? Like I would have ideas for starting new programs. Like maybe I could teach these people or tutor these people, or, maybe I could set up something to help people with this problem or whatever. And I was always just kind of searching for what it might be. And after a while of that, I went back to ballet. I built enough confidence and I was like, you know what? Really just I need to be doing ballet. Like that's what I need to be doing. And so I went back to ballet and immediately fell in love with it again and dove right back into it. Called back Beth and worked with her a ton, and that went on for maybe a couple more years. And then at a certain point, I just felt like I just fell back in love. I felt like I didn't lose too much. My body had stayed in pretty good condition from the powerlifting, and muscle memory doesn't really leave you. So I was happy that I kind of picked up where I left off and just went on ahead, but with a little bit more relaxed mindset of just having accepted that ballet was going to be a small part of my life, and that was okay because I still loved it and I wanted it to be a part of my life in general. So kind of removing the pressure from myself allowed me to come at it from a new angle and just really explore and be curious and have a good time with it and enjoy the process of coming back to it after a couple years off. I kept going with Beth for a while, and in one of our lessons, actually, very tragically, she slipped down the stairs as we were walking out together, and she broke her tailbone. She broke her back, and at that point, she was devastated. She was so afraid to lose her business. She was in her late 70s. She'd been building this business up for, I think, 30 or 40 years. She'd been building this business up. And so she asked me if I would teach her students while she was recovering so that she could keep her student base, she could keep her client base, and, return back to the studio when she was better. And she promised to teach me how to do it, give me lesson plans for each of the students, talk me through it, and if she was well enough, come and watch me teach, and just kind of help me navigate this difficult time with her. Just help her navigate this difficult time by holding down the fort, so to speak, while she recovered. She thought I would be. She told me that she thought I'd be good at it. I am very analytical. I really enjoyed ballet, and she wanted me to kind of take over while she was recovering. So it was about a year of that. So I was working my full-time job, and then nights and weekends I would go teach I would go teach and would take over her clients and her students. And not everybody wanted a student teacher, but a handful, several. I don't remember now how many, but maybe 10 or so people wanted a student teacher to continue working with them. And so she would give me lesson plans, and we would speak and email and send pictures. And she wrote a whole book and manual for me. And for her, it was actually, I think, a very exciting time that she got to document everything that she had worked so hard to build over her life. She had this opportunity to document, she had somebody to pass it to. So it was kind of this really incredible, it kind of turned into this incredible apprenticeship of getting to learn how to teach from her, who had been teaching me and who got me where I was with my technique, and be able to pass that on to people. One of my favorite paychecks I've ever gotten was that first very small paycheck from the very first student who I taught. And I thought, wow, like I can actually, help with this. It was meant to be temporary, but it was still very, very exciting. I couldn't believe that I got paid to share ballet with somebody. It was an incredible experience. So I taught for her for about a year, and eventually it was clear that she was going downhill, and she wasn't going to be able to recover. um, Sadly, she passed away soon after that. The anniversary when she passed away was just about a month crossing, a little bit after when I opened Broche. That timeline is a little bit fuzzy now, but she ended up not recovering to teach again. So I feel like I'm blessed with getting the torch to carry on from her, and being able to carry her legacy forward of teaching people what why I went to her is because her website and her message was all about believing in people who maybe seemed a little bit unorthodox, or seemed like they couldn't do it, or who had those gaps building, kind of like at Mathnasium, they had those gaps and they needed them to be filled in, and they needed a teacher to believe in them. And that's who she was for me, and that's the responsibility I felt to carry on to the next, to whoever I could pass that on to. So, the that period of time of coming back to ballet, working with her again, and then having this incredible opportunity presented was a whirlwind time. Looking back on it, it was very, very busy time working full time and then doing all of this after work. But one of the most life changing years of my life, to enable me to find a way to integrate my passion into my life, and find a way to integrate my passion into something I could help with. I still didn't think I would quit my full time job at that point, because I mean, it was uh, teaching nights and weekends is a far cry from having a whole business where you can make a living out of it. But I was so happy to be able to do it. It was the most fulfilling, let's say, hobby that I had had to date, to be able to enjoy teaching people and sharing ballet with them and believing in them and watching them progress. It was so incredible. So, anyways, after all of that, I opened my own studio after that. I ended up moving away from Denver. I still was working full time for my company. They went remote. So I was able to keep working from them from Denver, which was really great. So I moved to Denver, and then looked into studio spaces, found a place. I ended up needing to renovate it. So I learned all about how a sprung floor worked, how to install those. We got mirrors and we got bars and we got the whole thing. And it was a really small room, but it was just enough for me and a couple of people. I had intended to open it as a private coaching studio, because that's what I was doing before, was, private classes for people who either like me wanted to go further faster, or for people who feel like they're falling behind or missing the boat in their group classes and wanted extra, catch up or help time. That was my intention. So a small studio was fine, because it was my intention to open up for private classes. I would work. It was such an exciting time, learning how to renovate, learning how to do all this stuff. Like, we learned how to level concrete out. We learned just how leases work, how commercial leases work, like triple net versus gross. I mean, there was just so much learning to be had during that period of time. And then, of course, you're setting up a website and making a logo and branding and flyers and marketing and like all the things. It was so exciting. It was such a fun time. It's really scary. It was really scary to take that big of a risk, but I just thought to myself, like, if anything, at least I have like my own studio where I can practice after work and I can enjoy it. Obviously very expensive, but it was only a 1 year lease. So, I could cover it with what I was with my salary. So I at least knew that I was covered for that first year, and I had some time to figure things out. So I started Broche, and then, had my one studio and started advertising for private classes. I had like a grand opening, and of course, sat by myself in the studio the whole time for the grand opening, because, if you don't do too much marketing, no one knows who you are. So you have a grand opening and like nobody comes. So I had a grand opening that was, I think I have a video of me just like doing ballet in the studio, because nobody had come. But eventually some people did start to come. Eventually I started getting some new private clients, and, at a certain point, the private clients wanted group classes. So I started making small group classes, because the studio was small. So group classes of 3 people that I would kind of treat like private lessons. And, it kind of just evolved over time. It kind of just evolved step by step. as new people would come in. I was working full time for my job. I would work, like 6 or 7 a.m. till 3-ish, 4-ish p.m. And then I would go teach for the rest of the night and on the weekends. I did that schedule for like 9-ish months. And then at a certain point, I had enough clients where at least the studio was paying for itself. It was at least breaking even. And so I felt at that point that I could leave my job. And while it wasn't able to pay for me, it could at least break even on itself. And it was at least at a good, stable place. So from there, it kept growing. I felt it was really important to hire teachers to augment the studio and to be able to offer different perspectives. Because for me, I had taken class from so many different teachers, and I found incredible value in having all these different teachers because every teacher has their own perspective and every teacher has their own thing to offer. So I felt it was really important to have a lot of different teachers and allow the students to move between teachers. As it turns out, the students don't like that so much. The students really prefer having a single teacher and having someone consistent who they know. Meeting new teachers turns out isn't something that students are that excited about often. But my initial vision was that. So it ended up that, they kind of had their teacher who they all ended up gravitating towards and kind of sticking with. So I hired teachers, I was paying them before I was even paying myself. I felt it was really important to grow the business, to have a group of people who could help build it with me and who we could create it together. So over time, eventually that grew to 2 studios and then that grew to 3 studios. And since it was small, I would just keep that one and then I would open one. And I opened one a couple blocks over. So I had like 2 locations. And then I opened one more in the suburbs, a bigger studio in the suburbs, a little bit further away to reach a slightly different part of Denver. Continued growing the team. I think at some point we were maybe as big as 12 to 15 people on the team. So continued growing the team, continued building this business. We ended up putting on a beautiful recital in our bigger studio. It was such an amazing time. It was, performing was so important to me throughout all of this, and being able to give that to people and give them the space to perform was incredible. And that was so much fun. So, anyways, this the business kept building and it kept growing, and then, of course, COVID came, and that was a really tough time, especially because if you've been on a sort of growth path, you don't have a lot of runway to take a lot of time to be closed. And I was really determined to keep my staff on payroll during when we were all closed. So we didn't last too long before I had to close the doors on the Denver studios. I mean, it's actually been really great to see how all of the teachers and the team has grown and changed and kind of built their own niches after we all split up. Like it's been really cool to see what all that sparked and like how all of that has grown and changed. I mean, obviously that was a really, really tough time. Like the worst Zoom call I've ever been on was the one where I had to sit there with my whole team and tell them, we're not going to make it through this. Like that was awful. But over time, everyone's landed on their feet and kind of grown into their own, like made their own space in Denver, and it kind of yeah, it was really cool. It kind of incubated everyone into their wonderful careers that they've grown into since then. So it really, it's turned out really, really beautifully. In that time, I had from like COVID. So COVID was like March-ish, and we ended up closing in July-ish. And during that period of time, we had offered the link out to people in the community. We had a YouTube channel at that time. And so people were coming to stay in shape until their studios opened again, all of that. And so at the time when we closed the studios, I kept teaching online. I kept the online program going and just kind of dove into that. Now that's been about 4-ish years, I think, since that's been going. Yeah, that was 2020. Now it's 2025. So wow, almost 5 years. Um, After a certain point, maybe 2 years in, I thought we need to perform. We need to perform, and we need to have a chance to perform. Like we had a second recital planned. COVID canceled that, so I was like, we need to perform. But we're all over the world. Like we're all over the globe. We have people now in every continent except for Antarctica. Um, so I thought, well, maybe some people can fly to Miami and we can put on a show together and they can have like a little ballet vacation and we can put on a show together. So that's when I started the International Adult Ballet Festival and was very, very happy that so many people came to the first year, took a chance on me, and we had this amazing, magical time together. It was so much fun and a really great addition to everything that they had a chance to perform. And we were able to meet together in person and then go back home and continue studying together and meet again the next year and go back home and keep studying. So that was a component that really I think adds so much to it because you have the option to perform. I mean, maybe you can't come every year, maybe you can only come once, but you really have that option and that opportunity open to you, which really makes the studying for so many of us worth it because you know there's a place for you to perform. You know that you have a home on the stage. You're not like, what's the point? I'll never perform. You think, oh, I know the point because I have a stage I can perform on, and it really keeps the love alive and gives you a place to work towards and work for. So all of that, through all of that, I here we are. Here we are now in what is it, March of 2025, and we're going on now our fourth summer festival, and have just launched my vision for an adult ballet curriculum that I've been developing over all these years since actually 2016, as I mentioned in the last podcast episode. So just launched that, and lots of new and exciting things coming and growing. We've got Broche magazine, we've got our wall calendars, we've got merch and point shoe keychains and various things. So it's just always continuing to grow and to change. It's been a long, kind of ever evolving road to get here, but looking back, it's been, yeah, quite the journey. So when people ask, how did you get here? That was one of the questions. I was like, oh, I think we just have to start at the beginning because how I got here is kind of long and winding. But I haven't done it alone. Through over the years, I've had incredible teachers who have continued to teach me. I started teaching when I was inexperienced. I started teaching when I was very inexperienced and always was hyper aware of that. Although I did have that incredible apprenticeship with Beth and have had great opportunities for fabulous training throughout the way, I was inexperienced when I started teaching. Obviously, it was the circumstance and how it all came about, but I've always sought out teachers who will continue developing me throughout this period of time and throughout this phase. So while it's really tough to get like an actual teacher training program for an adult learning, like for me, I've always hired teachers to work with me privately who will teach me what I need to know about my own technique, what I need to know about issues students are having, and that support. So I've always throughout this whole time had that support system backing me up of a teacher, an experienced teacher who I can always go to and continue learning from. That's been a massive, massive, both inspiring to see my own progress. I think my students love seeing my progress because I'm still training privately myself all the time, but also the teaching ability continues to level up, continues to improve, continues to grow and go forward. And so that's been a big sort of behind the scenes foundational part of this whole thing is to keep growing in my own ballet because that's what I always wanted was the chance to train seriously at a high level and with great teachers. And through all of this, that has been an amazing underpinning of my whole life that I've still gotten to train at the level that I wanted to train at and get to immerse in ballet through all of it. So it's been a really unorthodox way of going about all of this. But sometimes the best things in life you just can't predict. So, with all of that, let me answer just a couple of the questions. I think the way I've gotten my story woven, I think I've answered most of the questions through, but let me just get a couple more of them here. So, when, why, and how did you decide to change your career path? See above. I don't think I decided as much as it chose me. I mean, I still had to make the decision that I was going to take the leap of faith and actually do it because obviously going from computer science, you're on a pretty nice salary, to going to teaching ballet, running your own business, entrepreneurship, you're like literally paying for the option to teach people. You're like paying for the opportunity to work and then, much less making money on your own. So that was a big, that was a big change. And I did decide to take a leap. I mean, I knew that I wasn't in the right place. I knew that I wasn't in the right place. And so that difficulty of continuing to be in that career enabled me to take that risk and take that leap of faith on myself. Have you ever regretted your decision? Um, on really busy or stressful times or times when things are really difficult. I mean, if you've run a business, you know what I'm talking about. There's times where it's just like nothing is going right, everything is going wrong. And I can remember like, oh, but it was so much easier when I had a regular job and I had weekends and I had paid time off and you know, I could go home at night and just close my computer and be done with it. But when I really, really look back though, especially at my journal entries and times, it's easy to have the rose-colored glasses when times are hard and think about how easy it was. But when I really look back, like it was a very unfulfilling time for me and I knew that I wasn't in the right place. And that feeling of not being in the right place is very agitating. And so while the times can be really tough being an entrepreneur and running your own business, and sometimes I kind of regret it. Like just in the moment when you're working really hard, you're like, oh, but it was so nice when I had those things. Like I don't overall regret it at all because you just found it was almost like a calling. I really feel like in many ways, like it chose me. I don't, it chose me and it called me to it. So I don't regret it. What do you exactly do now in your daily life, and how did you get here? So my daily life changes a lot from day to day. It depends on what season of the year I'm in and what um, things are going on in the business. So now we've got the summer festival, which is in the summer. So my day to day tasks change depending on if I'm going to the like getting gearing up to the festival or if I'm in kind of off season. Gearing up to the festival, I spent a lot of time preparing details for the festival, whether it's details about what we're eating, where we're staying, the choreography, the faculty, the itinerary, the photo shoot backdrops, the show program, the show order, editing the music, like these types, music licensing, like these types of things I spend a lot of time on in those months leading up to the festival. Um, a handful of months before that, I spent a lot of time signing the venue contracts, making sure everything is ready for the venue, and then marketing, getting those initial sales, getting the initial group of people in who are going to sort of seed the beginning of that festival, of that year's festival. So there's that stuff is all very time sensitive. Obviously, there's a date at which everyone is coming and expecting everything to be ready for the festival. So I that kind of dictates when there's a deadline around the festival that takes top priority, and I spend the time on that. But every day I teach. Currently, at the time of this recording, I teach every day 3, sometimes a little bit more hours of Zoom classes online, and then all of that gets edited and cataloged and categorized. That whole process around putting it into my curriculum, how all the new classes put into the curriculum, building the schedule, that type of thing is like a ongoing daily task. Then, you know, communicating with customers, communicating with dancers, making sure that everyone's questions are answered, they're all feeling good, they're progressing, like that whole thing. I also spend a lot of time preparing for marketing. So obviously, if you're running a business, you know all about how much marketing you have to do to keep your business going, to keep new clients coming in the door. So I do spend a lot of time on marketing, whether that's email marketing or video marketing or social media marketing, but a lot of time on that as well. And then, of course, accounting and keeping track of things in the business. Like I do all of that stuff too. So there's a lot of little details. I've got a couple of people who work for me who help me out with various tasks. So managing them, making sure that they have what they need and that they're still moving forward, setting the magazine layouts, the magazine articles, picking things like that. So I have, yeah, it's a very varied thing that I do on any given daily basis. I mean, how I got here, it's like it just took leaps of faith regularly for the last several years, all the way. Um, yeah, just lots and lots of leaps of faith and trying different things and trying to follow my passion and follow my curiosity and like, oh, I wonder what I want to make that or I want to make that and just kind of trying to follow all those whims, following all the whims of life. Did I ever teach children? Why did I decide to teach adults? Yes, I did teach children when I was teaching privately with my teacher, Beth, for my teacher, Beth, I should say. And then in the beginning, when I opened up Broche, I did teach a couple of children privately. And I taught some really, really cool kids. I taught this one girl who was studying at one of the local ballet schools and who was just feeling like she was really far behind. She was feeling super discouraged, and they came to me for some extra help. We spent, I think it was a summer working together, and she went back to school that next fall and just like soared ahead. She had so much confidence and so much technical knowledge from that summer working together. And now I mean, she's gone on to be an incredible dancer and doing great, beautiful things. So it was really fun to be a part of that turning point for her. She's still in some of the pictures on, well, maybe I've taken them down on my most recent website design, but I did used to have some pictures of us working together on one of my old website designs, and that was a really fun time. Also worked with a young ice skater who was wanted some ballet training to work on her port de bras and her flexibility, so worked with her on that. And then a very cool one, a young girl was playing Anna in the Frozen cast that was touring through Denver for a summer. So I taught her ballet privately for the summer while she was in town, so she could keep in shape by the time she got back to where she lived. So yeah, I did teach a couple of kids over time. I really gravitated towards adults though, because especially having learned as an adult, how I think about ballet is very cerebral and is very detailed and very logical and very structured. And I found that style just resonated a lot with adults. And a lot with business in the beginning is like finding your people, right? And the people who kept coming back and loved what I was doing were really the adults. Like, if you get too cerebral with it with a young child, it may not land as well, right? It may not land as well. So um the adults really loved my classes and loved what I was doing. And so at a certain point, I just that all the kids had kind of dropped off. I taught all of them until they decided to go, but I only listed for new students for adults. And at that point, really just started I really once I started focusing in on adults, I really hit my stride, and that's when the studio started to grow, and that's when we really started to build something meaningful. There it was when I started really focusing on adults because they're the market who I understand the most. They understand me, I understand them. I know where they're coming from, what they're missing, what their goals and their desires are, and so that was like a sort of a natural progression that I started off teaching everybody, see what would work, and the adults was really who liked what I was offering the best, and we really just kind of hit it off, and yeah, focused in. Okay, anything I would have done differently if I started a Broche over? That's a tough question. I mean, of course, knowing now, if I had all of this knowledge then, I actually don't necessarily think it would have been a good thing because at the time I was like super naive and didn't really know how hard things were going to be. And so that can be really, really helpful because you just kind of dive in there and you're like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? Like, let's just kind of give this a try. And you make sure you have your bases covered and um, that you have a good safety net and that you're not taking a risk that'll kill you, but you can take some risks if you just kind of like, yeah, I mean, let's see what happens. So I don't think I would necessarily go back and tell my younger self everything I know now. She doesn't need to know. She doesn't need to know anything about that. I would say I guess I would say if I had to change one thing, having started Broche over again would be, it was really difficult having started teaching the way I did, like with this opportunity from Beth and with kind of being on the newer side as far as teaching ballet goes. I was very new. It still had been like maybe 8 or so years, but like still rather new, right? Think about someone who's been dancing for their entire life and starts teaching. And then I came in and started in this unorthodox way. I did seek out training programs at the time. And I guess I would just tell my younger self in the beginning, like, you don't have to you don't have to you can get training other ways that I did figure this out after a couple of maybe 2-ish years when I started hiring teachers to teach me. I started just hiring teachers to teach me the things I needed to know because like there wasn't a training program who would accept me. I just started hiring teachers to teach me what I needed to know. I would have told myself sooner, like, you can always find an expert who's going to teach you the things you need to know. You can always look Now you can look on the internet. Like, now you have so much you can learn, but you can always find an expert who will teach you what you need to know. If you have the passion and you have the heart for it, like, there's always somebody who can help you and can teach you. So don't be afraid to look for these people. I think in the beginning I was kind of shy about having even gotten in this position of having gotten this apprenticeship and having started all of this so young, that I was nervous to ask for help. But that's how you get better faster, was like to do it. So I think it did take me a couple, maybe 2 years. I would just tell myself, start that sooner. Like, start the education process sooner, and don't be afraid to look for experts who can help you get where you're trying to go. Let's see. Tackling moments of self-doubt. I talk about this a lot with Grace next in the next episode. We already filmed it yesterday. I talk about it a lot with her, so I'm going to skip that one for now. We talked about self-doubt and self-confidence a lot, so I'm just going to skip that one for now. Let's end on this one. How do you stay motivated working for yourself? Mm, well, I think first of all, I don't work for myself. I work for the dancers who are my students. I work for the dancers, I work for the community, I work for the people who support me, right? I don't work for myself. In the beginning, maybe I worked for myself, but really, if you're running a business, you don't work for yourself. Like, you don't have a boss necessarily who's telling you what you need to do that day, but like, your customers are who you work for. You When you really want to help them and you really have a vision that you're trying to create, there's somebody you are doing the work for. Like, there is somebody on the other end that you want. There's a reason why you're doing this work, because you're doing this work because why can't they get their PRs? What do I need to do to help them with that? What kind of structure do I need to develop for them to keep coming back? What type of motivational tools do I need to develop for them to keep coming back? Like, they have a problem, and it's your job as the business owner or the person running it to solve for them. So the problems that your customers have are what's driving you, at least me at this point. But I mean, in the beginning, it is maybe more difficult before you actually have customers to to work for, because you're just kind of building this thing yourself and you don't yet have that feedback coming from the customers of what you need to be doing and what you need to be working on. Um, at the time, what was a big motivator was the fact that I had signed a commercial lease for a year and I needed to I needed to pay for it. So that was a big motivator to get things done, to do the marketing, to put myself out there, to get over my fears and like get out there, because the fear of having to pay for this thing was bigger than the fear of putting myself out there and going for it. So I, I that was a big motivator in the beginning. Now though, if you're asking about motivation, here's my take on motivation. If you really want to do the thing, like let's say you want to do the thing, whatever it is, maybe you want to practice ballet, you want to start your own company, whatever it is. If you really want to start the thing, stop asking yourself, what do I need to do to get motivated? That assumes that you have zero motivation to get started. Flip the script and assume that you have 100% motivation. Like, let's just say you want to do it, therefore you have motivation. Ask yourself instead, what is chipping away at my motivation? What is making me feel too heavy to get the work done right now? What is taking me away? This is the task. This is what I always use for myself if I'm feeling stuck on a task, or I can't seem to get started on it, or it's like really blocked or sticky. I think, what is stopping me from doing this? Not how do I jumpstart? Because I want to jumpstart. I want to go. I'm ready to go. I'm so excited about this thing. But what is keeping me from starting? What is the blocker here? And sometimes it's easier to think about what's blocking you than what you need to do to get jump started. So I think about this like, yeah, I think about it from the positive. Like, let's say I really want this. And if you don't really want this, that's a conversation, an honest conversation you have to have with yourself. But let's say you do really want it up here. You're at 100% motivation. Look at the things that are chipping away from it. You're discouraged. You're not sure if what you're working on matters. You're not sure if you're seeing progress. You're feeling alone. You're feeling lonely. You're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling like you're not making any dent in the things that you actually care about. Like, what are the problems that you're actually having that are keeping you from doing the work? And start trying to clear those blockers, and then watching the motivation grow from there, as opposed to thinking like, oh, I'm a lazy blob. How do I get motivated? Well, you want to do this thing. So assume the best here, assume the best, and then think about how you can get back to that sort of default state. Stop assuming your default state is zero and start assuming your default state is at that you want to do it, and look at the things that are chipping away from it. That's one of my go-to strategies still to this day for the super sticky stuff that I find difficult to get started on. This podcast episode went pretty long. If you're still hanging in with me with me here at the end, I hope you've enjoyed hearing a bit more of my story. It's truly been an incredibly rewarding experience. The feedback from the students has been incredible over the years. By now I've taught thousands of students in all walks of life, all ages, all levels of ability or disability to learn. I've taught so many different people at this point, and it's just been quite the journey to be able to reach people in this way, to watch their confidence build, to watch them take the confidence they built in the studio out into their life and make real meaningful change, whether it's changing their career, changing their relationship, moving where they live. Like, you actually watch people grow and change and improve and become not only the dancer who they want to be, but the person who they want to be. And that's been an incredibly rewarding and just totally wild experience that, if I could go back 10 years ago when I was not doing any of this yet, and I was still powerlifting and I was looking for meaning in life and I was looking for purpose in life, and just tell her, like, keep searching, keep letting this agitating feeling drive you forward, because you're going to find it. Don't soothe the agitating feelings. Let them keep growing. Let yourself be agitated until you know you found what you're looking for, because this feeling of agitation is telling you that you haven't found yet what you need to find and what you're meant to find. So keep going, keep searching, dig into those uncomfortable feelings. And I would just tell her that, like, you're gonna get there. You're gonna get there in 10 years. It's longer than you might imagine that it would be, but it'll happen, and it did happen. So thanks for coming along this ride with me. Next week, as I mentioned, I will have Grace's episode for you, where we dive into a bit more of the mental side, like what was going through my head in all those different phases of my life. And then after that, the following week, I'll have the point Q&A for you. So if you have questions about point shoes, if you have questions about going on point, getting on point, is it possible to get on point, how I went on point, any of those questions, shoot me a message or leave me a comment wherever you're watching this, and I'll answer those in the next 2 weeks podcast episode. So until next time, I wish you super happy dancing.